Back in 1997, at the absolute height of her fame, you got this 20-year-old musical prodigy standing on a global stage, and she calls out the entire industry that made her a star. She's holding an award, looks right into the camera, and with this little shrug, drops a line that people would be talking about for decades. And the reaction, it was instant, and it was huge. She was called a brat, an ungrateful diva, a freak. The media, the industry, and even comedians all lined up to make fun of her, to paint her as this unstable, pretentious artist. She went from being a tragic, waif, ethereal victim to, in her own words, a brat. But what if we were all wrong? What if that bad girl moment they all sneered at was actually a moment of real clarity? What if she was right? In today's video, we're going to talk about the full story of Fiona Apple, the woman who refused to play the game and never ever compromised. Before we get started with today's video, if you guys want to support my channel, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And I've been told from a lot of my subscribers that they find themselves unsubscribed from my channel, or they don't see my new videos pop up, so make sure you turn on all notifications. So to really get the woman on stage that night, you got to go back to the kid who got there. Fiona Apple McAfee-Maggart was born into a family of performers. Her dad was an actor, her mom a singer, and they met when they were in the same stage performance together. They had 2 kids but never married and ended up splitting up when Fiona was just 4. After the split, Fiona lived with her mother in a basement suite in Manhattan. It was a bizarre place. When they first moved into that place, there was a Kermit the Frog crucified to the wall with a derogatory message about Jesus. Maybe it foreshadowed what was to happen. She grew up between New York and LA, a total child of the arts. But for Fiona, music was just never about playing the right notes. It was a lifeline. She took an interest in piano by the time she was 6. She taught herself how to play thanks to a book called The Real Book, a compilation of jazz standards. The piano was pretty much how she dealt with a world that was often confusing and painful to her. Her biggest influences growing up were Billie Holiday and poet Maya Angelou. Her father started to see it right away. Each summer, she stayed with him in California, and when she was around 9, he suggested they write a song together, but she wasn't interested. According to him, she wanted to do it her own way. So the next summer, she returned, but she was struggling with insomnia and handed him a set of haunting cryptic lyrics about darkness. He recalled, "It kind of scared me at first." As for how she saw her family life growing up, Fiona told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "I had great friends. I had a wonderful family, but I thought I was the ugliest, craziest, and weakest thing in the world." She started exhibiting antisocial behavior, and she dealt with obsessive-compulsive disorder, anxiety, as well as depression. She told Elle magazine how bad her OCD was at one point, revealing, "At its worst, I was compelled to leave my house at 3 o'clock in the morning and go out in the alley because I just knew the paper towel roll I threw in the recycling bin was uncomfortable, like it was lying the wrong way, and I would be down in the garbage." It was at the age of 11, thanks to an offhand remark about harming herself and her sister at school one day, her parents started sending her to therapy. It was a move that her parents thought would help, but it made Fiona only more unhappy, with her admitting, "I've spent my whole life telling my innermost secrets to strangers." While the kids at school called her nicknames like Granny Smith, Macintosh, and Dog, later in life she was called the next big thing. Quite the contrast. When she was 12, she was the victim of a horrific crime by a stranger who had followed her home one day. It happened right outside her mom's apartment door, and she credited the family dog with saving her life. It was a trauma that she would later face with incredible bravery in her music, a defining wound she refused to let define her in silence. As for the criminal, he was never caught. Fiona remarked, "It's hard for me to talk about it. It shouldn't be a word you have to whisper, but I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it. It doesn't have much to do with who I am. You are the sum of your experiences, and it was one of mine. Life goes on. I don't want to be the poster girl for it." Songwriting became her sanctuary and her source of power. It was how she made sense of all that darkness, how she turned pain into art. She poured all of her complex feelings about this event into one of her first songs called Sullen Girl, a haunting track that would later show up on her debut record. It was a clear sign that even back then, she was never going to shy away from the messy, uncomfortable truths of her own life. In her early years, Fiona often clashed with her parents, feeling unheard and dismissed. Therapy had colored their perception of her, leaving her words being seen as more manipulation rather than emotion. She turned to writing letters instead, finding comfort in seeing her thoughts on paper, and soon those letters began to take on melodies and started shaping her feelings into songs. She also purposely avoided being too influenced by other musicians, wanting to create her own unique style. When her schooling fell apart in 1995 and college seemed out of reach, she turned back to what she knew best. She moved out to LA to live with her dad. She finished high school from there, and at the insistence of a voice in her head who told her to make a demo tape, she headed into the studio. And it was something that would quietly alter her life forever. It was upon returning to New York for Christmas around 1995 that her life would change. She made over 70 copies of that demo tape and only gave out one copy to a friend of hers. That friend, shortly after getting that tape, babysat the children of a music publicist named Catherine Schenker. That friend gave Schenker Fiona's demo tape, and Schenker then attended a Christmas party where she played the demo tape, and in attendance at that party was producer and Sony music executive Andrew Slater, who was managing the Wallflowers. Slater loved the tape and almost immediately signed Fiona to Sony-owned work group. Because she was only 17 at the time, she couldn't even sign her own recording contract, so her mom had to co-sign it. She received a $100,000 advance from the label. Slater told Rolling Stone, "She didn't have all the songs written, and for a long time it was just me trying to figure out what kind of sound she liked. Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, and the hip-hop records. So we started from there." The world was about to meet Fiona Apple, but the process to get there provided a few more hurdles. Recording her debut record was a difficult process as she retreated to LA with the members of the Wallflowers and multi-instrumentalist John Bryant. She had never played with other musicians before. She told Rolling Stone, "I just assumed he had paid everyone off to be there, and they were just all really pissed off to have to be there with me because I was a stupid little kid and they were real musicians." Also, things were not great with her parents and there were deeper problems. She was getting thinner. Recording was temporarily halted and Fiona got back into therapy and started to finally feel better. But it was a friend who also helped her turn things around. That friend was musician Lenny Kravitz, who gave her words of encouragement, and even when Lenny went off to tour, the two kept in touch. If you've seen the video for Lenny Kravitz's Can't Get You Off My Mind, he's talking on the phone in one scene, and it's actually Fiona Apple on the other end of the line. When her debut album Tidal dropped in 1996, she was just 18 years old, but the music itself felt ancient. It was this incredible collection of jazzy, piano-heavy songs that explored love, pain, alienation, loneliness, and desire with a lyrical depth that seemed almost impossible for a teenager.
Where you got the name for the album Tidal?
That came from a couple different places. It started out as one thing, and then it kind of like changed meanings over the course of time. It started out because I had just signed my contract, and I was in New York and hadn't started recording yet, and I was really excited but really scared at the same time. And I went up to my friends, and I was like, "Look, I got my contract. Isn't this weird?" and everything. They're like, "Oh, you must be really excited." And I go, "Yeah, I'm excited, but I'm also kind of, I don't know. I mean, I had this feeling like there was a rumbling coming, like something was coming, and just like a wave or something." And I go, "Yeah, like a tidal wave, whatever." And then I thought that's pretty cool because I never thought that there was much point in having a title to an album anyway, just because there was not like a theme to my album. It was just kind of a bunch of songs that I threw together. So I was kind of like making fun of the fact that it was supposed to be Tidal, and I was going to call it Tidal. And also then it turned into just being like about the fact that whole album is just kind of up and down and all the, roller coaster of me and my sick emotional, weirdness and all that. So it's Tidal, life.
Fiona, however, insisted the songs on her debut were not about one specific person, telling the Los Angeles Daily News. "There's a lot on this album that seems to be about me and one person, but usually I've just personified the world by using one person." She added one of her biggest influences on her writing was her parents splitting up, telling the magazine, "I've been in the middle of a couple of marriages, so I've seen a lot about how relationships work." The lead single Shadowboxer, whose lyrical content mainly explores the themes of the dangers of desire and vulnerability, was written by Fiona with collaborator John Bryant shortly after she got signed. The song peaked at number 34 on the adult pop airplay and number 32 on the alternative rock charts. The second single, Sleep to Dream, was actually the first lyric Fiona had ever written. That song peaked at number 28 on the alternative airplay chart. Fiona said about Sleep to Dream that it's a song about when you're in a relationship and when you start to second guess yourself, knowing what is real and what's not. It's a moment for her that she realized how she didn't want to be treated.
But there was one song that lit 1997 on fire. That was the third single, Criminal. With that sultry bass line and Fiona's smoky voice, Criminal became a cultural phenomenon. Couldn't get away from the song. It was all over radio and it was a staple of MTV. It ultimately peaked at number 21 on the Hot 100 chart, number 4 on the alternative airplay chart, and it also earned her a Grammy Award for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance and pushed Tidal to sell over 3 million copies in the US. The album peaked at number 15. By every industry metric, Fiona Apple was a superstar. But with all that fame came a whole new level of focus that was both intense and really invasive. The media narrative got locked in pretty quick. A lot of the attention was on the controversial music video for Criminal, which showed a very thin Fiona Apple in what looked like a messy house party. Critics and commentators got obsessed with her body, calling her a heroin-chic waif. An infamous cover story for Spin magazine in 1997 focused on her supposed misery and melodrama, basically reducing her art, which was fueled by real trauma, into some kind of gimmick for fame. Directed by Mark Romanek, who previously worked with Nine Inch Nails on their video for Closer, it addresses a young woman's guilt after taking advantage of a love-struck boy simply to offset her own low self-esteem. Fiona had this to say about the video, stating, "I had qualms when it was being made, but I could not admit it to myself. I'd done 2 videos and it wasn't satisfying. Everybody knew they could get a lot more from me. And it came to me as everything could be so great if you did this with Mark Romanek. He gets his videos played on MTV. And I thought, yeah, I'll get my video played. Then the video comes out and I just felt like an ass." Her new success happened at a time when female musicians were dominating the charts. Meredith Brooks, Alanis Morissette, Tracy Bonham, and Lilith Fair were all in full swing. Now, because of this, Fiona got a lot of comparisons to Alanis Morissette as well as Tori Amos in the press. But she admitted she was one of the few teenagers who didn't own a copy of Morissette's famous album Jagged Little Pill. As for the comparisons, she told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "I don't think it will last. We're being compared because we're girls and we're young, but eventually people realize that our music isn't really similar." The industry tried to stick her in a box, the damaged, tortured artist. The problem was Fiona Apple refused to stay in it. She was super outspoken in interviews, honest about her struggles, which included an eating disorder, depression, anxiety, and lingering effects of her assault. She wasn't the polite, grateful pop starlet that they were expecting. She was complicated, and she was honest. And that honesty, the thing that made her music so powerful, also made the industry really uncomfortable. They wanted the sexy vibe of Criminal, but not the powerful vulnerability that was underneath it all. They wanted the prodigy, but not the person. This was the growing tension between the artist and the machine that was about to blow up on national television. Then came the 1997 MTV Video Music Awards. At the time, MTV was still relevant in our culture, and the award show was the epicenter of 90s pop culture. It was an event that was built on spectacle, celebrity, and images that were all carefully managed. And right into the middle of it all walked Fiona Apple, there to accept the award for Best New Artist. She got on stage looking super intense and started by saying she hadn't prepared a speech.
So what I want to say is, everybody out there that's watching, everybody that's watching this world is bullshit. And you shouldn't model your life. Wait a second. You shouldn't model your life about what you think that we think is cool and what we're wearing and what we're saying and everything. Go with yourself. Go with yourself.
In just a few sentences, a 20-year-old had basically committed the biggest sin of being a celebrity. She pulled back the curtain. She stood in the heart of the Dream Factory and told the audience, mostly young, impressionable fans, that the whole dream was a lie. She wasn't being ungrateful. She was speaking from the heart, trying to share the truth that she had learned the hard way. In a 1998 interview with Rolling Stone, she explained how she felt, stating, "When I won, I felt like a sellout. I felt that I deserved recognition, but that the recognition I was getting was for the wrong reasons." She saw how shallow the whole celebrity machine was, and in one moment she might ever have on stage, she chose to speak out against it. And the industry did not love that honesty. The backlash was fast, and it was brutal. The speech wasn't seen as a sincere call for authenticity. It was framed as a temper tantrum. Magazines and papers painted her as a diva, suffering for her art and making everyone else suffer with her. Comedian Janine Garofalo, who, let's face it, whose name you haven't heard in a long time, did a vicious parody, making fun of the young artist. The message was clear. Fiona Apple was ungrateful, pretentious, and, well, weird. See, the critics weren't angry because she was wrong. They were angry because she said it out loud. Pop stars were supposed to be products, shiny and polite. They were supposed to thank the machine, not call it. Fiona had broken the unwritten rule. The very things that made her a brilliant artist, her raw honesty, her refusal to be a simplified version of herself, her sharp eye on the world around her, were now being used as weapons against her. For years, that speech was treated like a pop culture punchline, just some wacky VMA moment. The media had successfully painted her as a difficult, unstable woman. They wanted to dig a hole for her and make her stay there. But they really underestimated who they were dealing with. They thought they were burying her, and instead, they had planted a seed. Instead of backing down, Fiona basically doubled down. Her answer to the media storm wasn't an apology, it was a 90-word poem that became the title of her next album, whose shortened title was When the Pawn. It was a direct, defiant response to her critics, a complex answer to the simple cartoon version of her they'd created. More specifically, the title was in response to an unflattering story Spin magazine did on her in 1997 that painted her as a pretentious, self-obsessed drama queen exploiting her emotional wounds. She remarked, "They knew what they were going to do with the story, and it didn't really matter what I said, but I said some things that they could very easily edit together and make me look like a moron. I was upset about it, but thought, well, that's just what they do to you." It was only when Fiona was on tour and read the subsequent issue of Spin that featured subscriber letters about their response to her story that some responses included, "She's the most annoying thing in the world," etc., and how her whole shtick was an act. She penned the 90-word poem as a response that ended up giving her the title to her second record. She added how after The Whirlwind, that was her first record, she wasn't sure whether she ever wanted to do the whole process again. She went as far as not playing piano for 6 months once she got off the road, stating that she would only record new music if she had something to say. Her life slowly started to improve. She had set up a better personal life for herself. She was in a relationship with Boogie Nights director Paul Thomas Anderson. She now had more friends in her life, and she credited her boyfriend for boosting her self-esteem and creative ambition. Initially, she started to write music, and it started with 7 songs and grew from there. Fiona revealed how one of the big things she learned from her first album was that you didn't have to be on the cover of magazines or on MTV to be considered a musician. And the second time around, she focused on desensationalizing her profile in the media. She told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "In a lot of interviews, people just kept telling me what they thought of me instead of asking me about the songs. They just focused on the dramatic stuff, and I just shut down. I became the perfect girl to make a terror child out of." Fiona Apple's second album, titled When the Pawn, marked a shift towards maturity, swapping youthful melodrama for deep reflections on both heartbreak and tangled passions, all delivered through her smoky alto. The record cycles through struggle and surrender, moving between optimism, cynicism, hope, and despair. She told the Washington Post, "When I was sequencing the album, I was thinking about the amount of hope in each song." Released in 1999, the album was a huge leap forward. Produced by John Bryan, it was richer and more experimental, and lyrically way sharper than Tidal. Songs like Fast As You Can and Paper Bag were intricate and powerful. You can, baby, scratch me out, free yourself fast as you can. Even the critics who had made fun of her before had to admit she was a genius. The lead single, Fast As You Can, peaked at number 20 on the alternative airplay chart and number 29 on the adult pop airplay chart. None of the other singles charted, but the album still went platinum and locked in her status as one of the most important artists of the decade. She did little promotion for the album, feeling burnt out by the press's previous treatment of her. But the media still had a field day with her long album title and the 2000 show at the Roseland Ballroom, where she cut a show short. It was reported that Fiona had an onstage meltdown, and unfortunately for her, the media made it out that instability was just her brand. But her fight with the industry was far from over. Her third album, Extraordinary Machine, became a legend before it was even released. After taking a long break, it was producer and friend John Bryan who persuaded her to start working on new music. By 2003, she had a group of songs that she and the producer had played for her label Epic Records, who took a profound disinterest in them, claiming they weren't commercial enough. But the musician later claimed she wasn't happy with the record either. Fiona at the time couldn't figure out what she wanted to do next. It wasn't until she started recording with producer Mike Elizondo, who had worked with both Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, that things started to work a little bit better. He took a much simpler approach to the music, but her label Epic Records insisted that Fiona could only work on one song at a time, with the label frequently checking in on her. The musician hated the stipulation, quitting the project. Her label Epic Records was at a dead end. When an early version of the album leaked online, fans organized a Free Fiona campaign, even setting up a website, protesting what they thought was the label holding her music hostage. The Free Fiona supporters mailed foam apples to Sony's offices and demanded the album's release. The whole standoff was proof of her insane artistic integrity, and the pressure on Sony resulted in the label giving Fiona the freedom to finish up the record as she pleased. Extraordinary Machine saw a release in 2005, going gold, peaking at number 7 in the States. The album won rave reviews, making many best of lists for the year.
Oh, I could see you see me sincerely yelling.
After Extraordinary Machine, Fiona worked quietly and sporadically on new material, often without telling her label. She began composing songs around 2008 or 2009, not even fully admitting to herself that she was making a new album. Wanting freedom from industry interference after her previous ordeal, she recorded the Idler Wheel in secret with drummer Charlie Drayton. Fiona later stated that she used studio time to inspire her rather than feeling pressured to finish homework for a label deadline. When she finally presented the completed album to Epic Records, she delayed its release again for business reasons, waiting for the label to stabilize its leaderships so her work wouldn't be mishandled amid corporate disarray. After another long break, she came back in 2012 with the Idler Wheel. It was her most stripped-down album yet, a raw, percussive record that felt incredibly personal. Then in September of 2013, in one of her strangest career moves, she appeared in an ad for the food chain Chipotle with the musician covering Pure Imagination from the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
With pure imagination.
The video, which follows a scarecrow as he discovers the truth about factory farming and processed food, was described as haunted, dystopian, bizarre, and beautiful. In 2014, Fiona wrote the opening theme Container for the Showtime drama The Affair.
And buried a man I never knew. And when
Then after an 8-year gap between records came the moment that proved she'd been right all along. Fetch the Bolt Cutters was released in 2020, and it wasn't just a record, it was a full-on cultural event. Recorded mostly in her own house using everything from her dogs barking to banging on the walls for percussion, it was the sound of a woman who was completely free. The album's title was inspired by a line from the TV show The Fall, where a detective about to save a tortured girl says, "Fetch the bolt cutters." For Fiona, it was a mantra about freeing herself from any prison, whether it was a bad relationship, what society expects, her record label, or even her own self-doubt. The album was called a masterpiece. Pitchfork gave it a rare perfect 10, their first for a new album in a decade. It won 2 Grammy Awards for Best Alternative Music Album and Best Rock Performance.
Sebastian said I'm a good man and a stone.
That raw, messy, and unapologetic honesty she was torn apart for as far back as 1997 was now being celebrated as revolutionary. It seemed like the world had finally caught up to Fiona Apple. Most recently, this past May, she released Pretrial, Let Her Go Home, a protest song against the impact of cash bail upon working-class families, which was inspired by her time as a volunteer court watcher.
They wouldn't let her. They wouldn't let her.
Fiona Apple's career has really been defined by her refusal to hide the mess. She's openly talked about her lifelong struggles with OCD, depression, and anxiety, and she's written honestly about her trauma. Not as a story with a clean ending, but as something that's an ongoing part of her life. The hardcore vulnerability is the source of her power. She doesn't just show you the polished after photo of healing, she invites you into the difficult, messy process. This radical honesty has helped break down stigmas around mental health and has made her a hero for listeners who see their own struggles in her work. She never chased fame. She famously canceled tours to care for her dying dog. She's not on social media, and she has spent years volunteering as a court watcher. Looking back, that VMA speech wasn't an outburst, it was a mission statement. She saw the empty promises of celebrity culture and chose to speak a simple truth. It's a message that hits even harder today. In a world flooded with influencers and perfectly curated online lives, her warning against modeling your life on what other people think is cool feels more important now than ever. Her legacy isn't just in her 5 perfect albums or her Grammys, it's in her influence on a whole generation of artists who feel like it's okay to be vulnerable, to be difficult, and, well, to be real. She proved that you don't have to play the game to win. In fact, her career proves that the only way to truly win is to refuse to play at all. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock Roll True Stories. Take care.